All right, everybody, David Parsons here, ready to give you another nostalgia trap if you are. We've got one of our favorites on today, Luke ONeil. He is the author of a new book called Lockdown in Hell World. We had him on before. Go listen to his episode before on his book, Welcome to Hell World. He's conquering the whole Hell World corner of the literary universe. And to me, he's just one of the best voices out there. He has such a way of capturing the rage and anger and despair of life in America. And I just want to give you a quick sample of a rant I just read from him about, all the just exhausting conversations we have about like tech and free speech. This is a great little piece from his newsletter. It says, and here's Luke ONeil. Every time anything happens, we gotta immediately shift to talking about what if the opposite thing happened. Well, you won't like it when they take your post down, will you? No, of course not. I'll think, well, this sucks, then whine about it like a huge fucking baby if they do, and then I'll go about my life. Start a fucking zine or something. Or just shut the fuck up for a while. Who cares? People aren't having their speech constrained right now. They're having their ability to be unnaturally amplified constrained. People can say whatever they want still. They just don't have access temporarily to one or two specific massive recruitment platforms for organizing crimes and hate. Who cares? Trump not being able to post lies to 100 million people every single day is a net good for the world. The entire network of worms who worship him not being able to organize and gas each other up as easily as they have been for years is a net good. These seem like easy distinctions to make to me in the same way that saying rallying and protesting and occupying government buildings for the cause of good is good and doing it for the cause of bad is bad. That said, break up and nationalize Facebook and punt Twitter's servers into a bottomless pit. Who cares? We do not need any of this shit to live or thrive personally or as a society. So that's Luke ONeil on his Substack. Go find it. And whether you agree with that or not, I love it. I love his tone, and I love his ability to kind of break through the bullshit and get down to what's really going on in America. So we had a really fun conversation here talking about the Capitol siege, what might be happening, and really most of all about his book Lockdown in Hell World, which tracks this whole year, the last year of lockdown, of COVID, of George Floyd protests. We talk about Bernie Sanders and what happened there and where we're going with the Biden administration. So I hope you enjoy this. We've got lots more Nostalgia Trap stuff all over the place, including lots of episodes on our Patreon for those who are supporting the show. Patreon.com/Nostalgia Trap. Thanks so much for those that are doing that. We're really having a lot of fun with our movie and pop culture episodes, and we're live on YouTube every Thursday at 1 p.m. Just did one with 1 p.m. Pacific time. Just did one with Justin Rogers Cooper, which is up on the Patreon now for subscribers, in which we lay out our own sort of scenarios of what we think is happening, particularly with the realignments we're seeing very quickly in front of our eyes after the Capitol siege. So go check that out, patreon.com/Nostalgia Trap. And thank you to all the people who've joined recently. It is the thing that keeps us going is our listeners. We don't have any support from anywhere else. So thanks so much and enjoy this conversation. Here is me with the one and only Luke ONeil. All right, Luke. Well, it's good to have you back. How's it going?
It's shitty.
Yeah.
Real shitty.
We have a slogan here on Nostalgia Trap that we say history ain't done with us. And there's a piece in the introduction to your new book, which I want to get to, Lockdown in Hell World, where you say something very similar. You say we're at the point where history is rhyming already, and the first note of the song hasn't even resolved yet. It really feels that way, right?
Yeah, I think it's. I think I also, it's a common thing people have said about this year, in that, time has sort of ceased to feel normal, like the way that we typically experience it. And I think what I was talking about there was like recently a cruise ship that people went out on like a month or two ago, and everyone got COVID on it. And like, wasn't that one of the first like indicators of this when we all first started to think this is real, like 10 or 11 months ago? So I don't know. It just goes to show that we haven't really learned any lessons. We haven't really changed anything. We barely even, tried to get this thing under control, and now it's averaging 4,000 deaths a day. It's pretty fucking weird.
Yeah, and it's like you see headlines like that where they're like, "Oh, they opened a cruise ship and everyone got COVID," and it's like, no shit. Like it just seems like the most obvious thing that would happen, and yet here we are. I mean,
Right.
it's funny one of the things you point out that I think is really great about like sort of America, because this really does seem like some sort of like referendum on like American history in some weird way, right? But it feels like we don't have an enemy. Like COVID's not an enemy that we can like shoot with guns. And that's like something like, when did you have that thought? Because it seems like that's really part of like understanding how we just can't address this.
Well, that quote in particular was actually me referencing another writer named Joe Cohane, who I did this series for the Hell World newsletter called The Last Normal Day. I did about a dozen of them, and I had other writers talk about the experience of the COVID year from like when they first recognized that it was actually real. I think that happened for most of us some point in March of last year, but the day was different from everybody. So I had a lot of people sort of relate what that was like. But yeah, I think he was so Joe Cohen was a great writer. He was referencing James Baldwin, and how basically the only way we can think of to deal with things in America is by shooting it or bombing it, and you can't shoot a virus with a gun. It doesn't really. I guess you can shoot it with a needle, but we don't aren't even doing a very good job of that right now either.
Yeah, and it feels like somehow like fighting the virus became this like thing that like liberals do. You know what I mean? Like things that like living is something that liberals care about. Or I mean, it's weird how that I mean, that's a narrative that's like emerged in the last decades. But one that like seems like it's like handcuffing us here is that like you're a pussy if you're wearing a mask and shit like that.
Yeah,
that stuff's insane.
It's insane. And we've got one of the sickest things I've seen and was that video from inside the Capitol the other day when they all went into lockdown, and one of them was trying to hand out masks, and a bunch of these fucking ghouls were like laughing it off and waving it away like, I don't need a mask. Inside this, hot box of COVID. And sure enough, it seems like some of them are starting to get positive tests after that about a week later. So good job by being a tough guy without your mask.
Yeah, it's really weird because it's like, we've said almost like as a metaphor for years that like the Republican Party is a death cult, but now it seems like they literally are like an eyes wide shut, like fucking like death cult.
Right.
It's insane. And to see it happen like that quickly, and that's part of what like that history rhyming thing is really like chilling to me, because it's almost like the acceleration in sort of like mega events seems like it's like reaching some sort of fever pitch, and it feels like at what point are we all overwhelmed? Maybe we've reached that point already.
Yeah, it's really wild that all of this is happening. I mean, as we're speaking, they're impeaching Trump again for the second time.
Right.
Just looking around at my TV to see one asshole after another talking about how it's cancel culture. And then, this is all going on in the midst of a pandemic in which we're like dying by thousands every day. It's I mean, you can't, it is overwhelming, and I'm constantly overwhelmed, and despite, leading a pretty comfortable life this year, unlike so many millions of other people. And, it's a blessing and a curse to be able to work from home, because I'm not exposed to the virus as much as people who were forced back into work, but also I'd have to sort of don't have anything to distract myself from this sort of, I don't know, this like long, constant sort of depressive episode that so many people are going through.
Yeah. I mean, it's like kind of an enforced depression. I mean, the times that I've experienced like more like pronounced depression in my life, it's been like this. Where it's like,
Right.
sort of like every day is the same. You're inside. You just kind of like move from like the couch to the bed
Right.
to the chair to the kitchen and then go back to bed. And that sort of like, yeah, that Groundhog Day element of it is getting tough. And I mean, like I experienced a loss of a friend recently. And
Yeah, I'm
just
so
like,
sorry to hear that, man.
thank you, man. And something I'll talk more about on the show eventually. But like for now, like just my initial thought of it was like having to experience this while in this kind of mode. You know what I mean? Where it's like you just
Right.
have to like it feels like everything else. It's just one more thing that you just have to sit with. And there's like I don't know. There's a real feeling of powerlessness too, which is like I don't know. Maybe we can get into your book, which I think is such like a great like diary of things that how rapidly this year transformed, and it's kind of amazing to think that your book before, which is Hell World, welcome to Hell World, right?
Right. Yep.
Was already pre-COVID. You were I think really adept at reflecting how alienating American society is and how the experience of American life is really fucked up. But COVID just like brought all that out. So like your new book, Lockdown in Hell World, sort of tracks how this year sort of brought it all out in a way that we haven't even like new depths of despair, I'll say, that you capture,
Right.
Luke.
Right.
But maybe we can start with the last normal day things. I think that's a really great idea. And made me think about like my last normal day. What was your last normal day?
Well, there's I write about it in there's an essay in there. Death is the capital of Uruguay. When that was my entry, but mine was sort of a couple. It took a couple days. Like I started to get scared in March, probably around like March 8th or 9th or something, and I remember one of the last things I did was I went and I read about this in there. Is I went to break up with my therapist, and then I went for a swim. I was like a big swimmer for a couple of years at like the YMCA or whatever, and I did both of those things, and it just had this like, the eerie feeling that a lot of cities had around Boston. Right around then, like people were starting to not go out much, but things were still open, so I could still
Yeah.
go to the pool and be like one of the only people in there. And I remember like asking the lifeguard, just some like college kid, like if it's safe to be in here. And they're like, oh yeah, we're cleaning everything. And chlorine is, apparently kills it. And I was like, okay, good enough for me, like, and then I write this, like we're desperate to be told by authorities that things are going to be fine, even if the authority just has a whistle,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and then I went home that night, and then, finally, like and I think to this day, my wife is shocked that I took it this seriously, because I don't know, my personality is kind of like the type that, oh, nothing's going to happen and it's all going to be fine, but I for some reason, I took it pretty seriously right from the get-go, and we sort of haven't really done anything since then.
Yeah, no, me neither. And
I mean,
and gotten some like pushback from people in our lives a little bit of like we're like freaks for taking it seriously.
yeah, weirdly, I mean, I write about, my family being a bit more Republican than me, a good amount, but weirdly, all my family like took it seriously too. So I didn't get any of that pressure from my mother to come visit or anything like that. Although we did go once, early on, and sit out in the yard, and we went once to my in-laws, and my wife has seen her mother a few times, like sitting outside and stuff. But other than that, like, and like maybe like the only thing I've done in a year is I went to about a dozen marches and protests, around Boston and Massachusetts. And even with those, I sort of, had my mask on and walked along the sidewalk and tried to stay away from people. Like there was a few times, at the height of all the marches for, to protest police violence. Like I was actually pretty scared. I was like, this seems like I could very easily, even though everyone was wearing masks, it seemed it's kind of frightening. I don't know. I guess that makes me a liberal pussy. But.
No, dude. This year is going to give me permanent PTSD, man. I have dreams. I have dreams all the time of being in public and people aren't wearing masks, and I'm like, what the fuck? And I wake up, like it's a nightmare, all the time.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's not going to go away. I mean, I was in the grocery store yesterday. I went to the grocery store right after I read the LA Times story that was like, the numbers are insane, you're fucked, that sort of story.
Yeah.
Literally, the LA Times was saying that like children are apologizing to their dying loved ones over FaceTime and and for exposing them to the virus, and just like some of the grimmest shit you could imagine. And I go to the grocery store and I'm literally like, I don't know if you do this, but I'm like holding my breath nearly as I pass people.
Yeah.
It affects my breathing is what I'm saying.
For sure. And I don't know. I think I think, and I think I'm sure you agree with me that we, all of the blame or the bulk of the blame should go to our leaders for not tackling this right away, for not paying everybody to stay home, for not shutting everything down. But I do also want to leave a little bit of that carved out for the people who just like, fuck it, and kept living their normal lives the entire time. Like you see all these stories of like, club parties and people going wild and dancing and shit. And like, I don't know. As much as I know that the blame goes to the government for not doing a better job of this, I still can't help but be like, what the fuck is?
Yeah, dude, I don't understand it. I mean, part of it, it's weird because it's like my feelings are all over the place on it, and like, very judgmental. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? Like in the sense of like, we need to like cooperate here, but it feels like the sense of like a society that could actually create some sort of consensus and cooperation is just like a figment of our imagination at this point. But either way, yeah, I feel that way. And part of me is like, also, I mainly like, I couldn't do that myself. Like, how are you fucking sitting in a bar? How are you doing any of this shit? Like, I can't, whenever I'm anywhere, I'm freaking out.
At one point over the summer when it seemed like things were okay or getting better or something, I went into a restaurant, and because I, like lots of people, I really miss bars and restaurants.
Yeah.
I walked in and I was just like, no, I can't do it. It's like, it's got bad news written all over it. But, I want, well, not more than anything else, but like among like, my frivolous things, I really want to just go sit in a bar and like eat some shitty food and drink a beer and like watch some stupid game on the TV. Like,
Dude, I feel that. I mean, that's nostalgia trap shit. But at the same time, it feels changed, right? Like when will you be ready? When will you be ready for that dive bar experience again?
I don't know. I mean, I saw something yesterday that they were saying maybe in the fall that shows can start back up again, and that's still so fucking far away. The fall, Like, I don't know, man. But at the same time, I feel myself sort of locking into this habit of just being at home, and this is all happening just as. I think we talked about this sort of thing last time we spoke about, being in our early 40s, maybe about like, I probably would have been winding down my going out anyway. So this is like,
it's weird to be at that phase. Like, I feel for the people that are in their 20s. Like, I mean, when I was 27, 28, in my 30s, I was still just in bars all the time. I lived in New York City, in Brooklyn. I was like, that's all I did was hang out in bars and restaurants and be in that scene. And then slowly, as you get older, and you sort of like, I was already sort of retiring in that sense. I feel bad for the people who were not. Maybe those are the people that are at the bars.
Yeah, maybe those are the ones still going out. I'm also like, I've taken to going to bed so early too, because like like you were saying, like the way it relates to depression, it's just like. Most days I wake up, and if I don't have something to write that day or I don't have anything to do, I basically look forward to dinner and going to bed like instantly,
Yeah. It's I don't know where you're at with like drinking and such, but like, I was always my wife and I have a thing where like we sit down at 4:30 in the afternoon for cocktails and dinner, and then like and then like after dinner we're just like I just like watch a movie and go to bed, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And that process has become even more precious as we're here, but at the same time I'm like I used to like drink beers at lunch. And I'm just like ruined when I do day drinking now. Like,
I can't do that. I was drinking pretty solidly throughout like the first, 5-6 months of it. And then since then I've cut back a lot, maybe a couple nights a week.
It's funny how there's this discourse. I don't know if it's still there, like right at the beginning of this, where people were like, let's use the opportunity to do like, home workouts and yoga. And we're going to all sort of like do this self-care thing where we're going to take on a craft or something. And it seems like that optimism isn't there anymore. That like, and it feels like it's hard to do that shit. Like it is hard to do anything. And I've like, I even though I have less work to do, all of it feels like a mountain to fucking climb.
For sure. I still get out, I go for my runs every day, and that's mercifully I have that. I'd go crazy if I couldn't do that, but that's like the only time on any given day where I'm outside of the house. And like a big part of this for me, which I read about in the book a lot, was that we just happened to move to the suburbs like April 1st.
Wow.
And it's a blessing and a curse in a way, because, there's a lot more space out here than like we lived pretty close to, like a mile or two from Boston where we used to live. And now we're maybe like 40 miles away. And, but it was this strange alienating sense to arrive in a new town. Like I never even heard of, to be honest, a new town in Massachusetts, and everything was closed, and, we didn't know anybody.
How do you even get to know a town when you move here?
Right. And people, all friends and family, like, oh, how's the town you live in? Like, I don't know, to be honest. I have no idea what it's like not during a pandemic. It seems nice, there's nice, lots of trails and stuff, and a nice river. And, so I don't really, it's been all sort of, unmooring in a way, but, again, as I make pains to point out whenever I talk about this shit, we haven't died. My wife's teaching remotely, thank God.
Yep.
And we still are making a living and everything. So compared to what so many people have gone through, I super lucky, obviously.
Even though it seems like there was that was another sort of story from the beginning, was just like this sort of like city exodus and people move into the suburbs. And I had friends who were trying to like go rent houses outside, and it's like there's sort of like this get out of the city thing, where I know that the place you moved to is under lockdown, but how is it different being in the suburbs for this?
I don't know. There's certainly more Trump signs and flags, although my town also appears to be pretty split. It's not like a super conservative place, but it's a lot more so than where I used to live. And there's that one chapter in the book where I write about almost, having to fight my Trumpy neighbor. But, for the most part, it's not too much different. I mean, I wouldn't be going, like we were just talking about, I wouldn't be going out in Boston. Like there's nowhere to go, everything's closed. Like, like people were like desperate to go sit on the sidewalk in like the city to go out to restaurants and stuff. But like, that sucks. That's not going out to a restaurant. It's like sitting on the sidewalk under normal times is shitty.
Isn't that like what like drew people to cities or always, I think we talked about this last time too, is like being young, you're like thinking about like, where are the good bars, where are like the good restaurants, where are all the hip clubs and all that kind of shit. And like part of it is getting older and not caring about that as much, but there's also sort of the feeling now that those places aren't where you want to live near.
No, they aren't even.
Matter.
And as such, I think like rents and prices are going down in Boston. And I don't know if that's true in like other big cities, but I wonder if it's going to be good in a way, maybe like actual non-rich people can move back into city centers, like, because that's why we moved to the suburbs. Like we there's no possible way we could have ever afforded to buy a home anywhere in the vicinity of Boston.
Oh God, no. Yeah.
Like, at least, like a studio or something would be like $700,000-800,000, and it's like, and I never wanted to move to the suburbs at all, but after, spending so much money on rent for so many years, it started to seem ridiculous. Like, what are we doing here? So.
Yeah, no, and the city sucked too, in the sense of like the even before this was happening, the city had become too expensive, not just with rent, but with and I've been talking about New York here, but I'm sure the story in Boston is similar in terms of gentrification and the closing down of cool old dive bars replaced by fucking yogurt shops and that whole story.
Right.
Like so much of it had like made the city. There was like I used to walk in New York City and like walk by a Home Depot in Manhattan, and I'm like, why the fuck am I in New York City? I could be, the Home Depot is in like it just kind of like the suburbanization of the cities sort of made it like, why the fuck am I paying this much to be in Applebee's land?
Right, exactly. So I don't know.
Yeah. Shit. I wondered if we could talk politics a little bit, because one of the things like the last normal day. A lot of it, when I think about my own like last normal days or last normal thoughts, ideas of this country was, the Bernie primary. And like you mentioned, were you at the New Hampshire thing with the strokes there?
Yeah. We went to that. And now I talk about that as like one of my last, I think I call that the last day I had hope in the book,
Right.
And yeah, that was an extraordinary thing to be at. And I forget the date. It must have been mid to late February, and just AOC and Bernie and Nina Turner and Cornel West and the Strokes, and it's like, this is fucking cool. And we all thought things, this was when Bernie had looked like he was actually had a shot.
Yeah, I know.
We pretty soon figured out that they weren't going to let that happen, and now Joe Biden's going to save us now. So.
Well, it's weird because part of it for me was always like this strategic thing of thinking like, well, Bernie can win and anyone else is going to fucking lose. And if you fucking nominate Biden, he's going to lose. But then Biden won. And that part of all of the year has been like way different than I anticipated in a ton of ways. But one of them was speaking of the Strokes, I didn't know that they had such a great new album in them after all these years.
Yeah, it's really good. It's
one of their best, I think, honestly.
It really is up there. And like I've gotten back on a big Strokes kick for some reason, and like I didn't really pay attention to the last couple of albums that much. But, obviously without having almost nothing to do besides sit on my computer, I've been listening to them more, and they're great. I also got really into Albert Hammond Jr.'s solo stuff.
Yep.
Like I completely overlooked all of that, and it's like really good. It sounds like, like 60s folky stuff, kind of like his dad, or 70s, and then but with like the Strokes guitar on it. I'm like, this is really cool.
I never stopped loving the Strokes. I never stopped loving Julian Casablancas and that sort of like falsetto thing that he does. Like there's just so much that I love about that band. But then when they came out for Bernie, I was just like, I don't know. That's the last time I felt a sort of like beaming inside, of like this, like the feeling of like, and it's weird because I remember the Strokes being on Saturday Night Live in 2001, I think, maybe 2002. Mm-hmm. It was like right after 9/11. I was on mushrooms and I saw it and I was at like a house party and they had Saturday Night Live on TV. I think maybe this was the last moment that SNL was like hip at all. But like Jack Black maybe was hosting and the Strokes were there. And I remember just thinking, wow, this is like a generational moment. And maybe it was just the shrooms and maybe it was just being in my 20s. But either way, I felt a little glimmer of that with the Strokes again, and on stage with Bernie, because that like they did the song New York City Cops, and like cops were throwing him off the stage. I was like, there's some energy here.
Yeah, there sure was, but
it's all gone.
Didn't work out. I mean, I guess we were both wrong, and a lot of us were wrong about there's no way Biden can win, but we didn't really know that there was going to be like a massive worldwide pandemic.
Yeah. He wouldn't have won without the pandemic.
Probably not, but who knows? I mean, I feel stupid trying to predict anything ever again.
Yeah, I know. I do it anyway, but it's,
yeah, right.
Well, you can't help it, right? And like yeah, go ahead.
That's the business that we're in, podcasting and writing. You got to have a take on everything. Like, I'm really trying not to. This might sound ridiculous to anyone listening who like follows me on Twitter, but I'm really trying to not have to weigh in on everything anymore. It's like it's not always easy, and I'm trying to to tamp down my certainty about anything anymore. Like, I don't know. I think this is just such a thing where you're not supposed to admit you were wrong or you fucked up or whatever, and that sort of thing is really like poisoned everything. That's sort of the Trumpian way.
Yeah, we needed some humility when it comes to that, and I'm very guilty of that on Twitter. And I mean, in fact, I think I tweeted this morning that like something along the lines of none of us know anything, so if you have a know-it-all attitude, it's really obnoxious.
Sure.
And that was partly aimed at myself, I think, because it's part of the business is to have a take and to be like certain, and like to drop into Twitter and say, but actually, here's what's really going on. And I have the special kind of vision of that when it's like, dude, shut the fuck up. There's billions of us on the planet. Like, none of us knows what's happening. And if anybody says they do, they're fucking lying.
Yeah, for sure. Just a big fucking dumbass at the end of the day, I suppose. But
that's what's sort of horrifying about the QAnon people, though. Jesus Christ.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think I sort of one of the people that didn't take it as seriously. Like, a lot of my buddies have been reporting on it for a couple of years, and it always just seemed ridiculous to me. But I think all of us who didn't pay enough attention to that really sort of missed the ball on that whole thing.
It's weird how like QAnon is like, you see these headlines that are QAnon's like big in the yoga community and shit like that. And I'm just like, this is such a different like take on the world than I had in like the 90s of like what culture wars were and things like that. Like I think the woman Ashley Babbitt that was killed in the Capitol the other day, like she's in like a polyamorous sort of like throuple, where I'm like, there were these like, I think maybe they were imagined like dividing cultural lines. If you remember like fucking grunge rock and all that shit was like positioned against like the evangelical Christians who were, uptight about sex and anti-abortion and all that sort of thing. It just seems like those lines aren't existent in America anymore.
Yeah, there is a really weird crossover between QAnon and like the wellness, mommy blogger type of things,
Right.
And then there's this kid, the kid with the Viking hat or whatever who got arrested and he wouldn't eat unless he got his organic food. It's like,
I love you said kid. I think he's 32.
Is he? I don't know.
That's a kid now. It's so weird.
We call everyone kid in Massachusetts. That's a term of, it's a catch-all term. Call your grandfather kid. Like, hey, how you doing, kid? But I think that it's like, the boundaries between all this shit are super blurred now. It's not like, a Republican isn't, some stuffy guy in a suit, although there's still plenty of those. And a conspiracy theorist isn't just, some scraggly looking dude with a beard in a shack. It's like, the yoga teacher or whatever.
So, yeah, I mean, speaking of that NYC cops moment with the strokes, it seems like the cops and the police were like a huge story throughout the whole year, right? And like, and it seems like that's rapidly changing, like right in front of us. That narrative, like, it's almost like the defund and abolish people are gonna like be really marginalized as like the sort of ruling class comes together around the need for like, security and protection in the police. Does that make sense? Like in other words, MAGA killed a fucking cop at the Capitol thing the other day, and that like seems like it's a really, I don't know, important moment in some way.
I think that, I mean, again, not predicting what can happen, but I really hope, as a lot of people have been saying right now, that this thing is, the Capitol isn't used as an excuse for Patriot Act 2 and to, to beef up the security state even more than it already is. Like that, we're already, they already can do basically whatever they want once they call you a terrorist, you know.
I assume they're listening right now somehow.
Yeah, right. There was some guy who got arrested at the Capitol who said a joke like that the other day, and it came true. So
Right.
he's like, "Oh, you're listening to FBI, fucker," and then we're like, "Yep," and we got you. So I certainly hope that all this doesn't, that all that energy that we saw all summer, all that shit still needs to happen. We still need to drastically change the way that we police in this country, and whether that's defunding or abolishing. I mean, obviously I'd like to see it taken as far as we can, but I don't really have much hope at the moment with the incoming Biden and Harris administration.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah.
And they both have said, they have no intentions of defunding the police. And as everyone likes to joke about, Kamala actually was a cop,
Right.
And Joe Biden, Biden writing the crime bill. And it just sucks to see all of that energy sort of wilt away. Hopefully it won't. I don't know. It's a tricky thing, man. Like,
we're in the middle of it too. I mean, it's like we're Trump's not even gone yet. Like it's weird because there was this moment, like I feel like maybe it was a couple weeks ago when like Biden won and they were certifying the election maybe, and like the vaccine was happening, and there was this sort of like combination of news stories about Biden winning and the vaccine, and everything's going to be different. And it feels like even that like rubbed off really quickly as the like Capitol thing happened. It's sort of like this push back and forth. I don't know. It's fucking with people's minds. I know that. Like the sort of like feeling of like hope and then draining hope back and forth is not healthy. Like that's part of like what I feel like most that your work captures, Luke, is like how this is tweaking America and like tweaking generations of young people, and like,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we don't know where it's gonna go.
It's weird. Like I don't know if I mean, you're not supposed to even say anything remotely positive about Biden as a leftist, and that makes you some kind of sellout, I guess. And I don't have anything to say positive about Biden, but the reason that he won, that he's not Trump, actually is pretty good to me. Like, I'll take it.
Yeah, me too.
I'll take not Trump for a minute and see.
Dude, it's the Trump people want to fucking kill us. You know what I mean? You have to. I mean, even if we're the left, we have to make alliances sometimes with like. It's just like that's just the way it works. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm not a Biden fan at all. But at the same time, it's like this is sort of like what we're watching is like a realignment that I feel like in some ways I have fucking nothing to do with it. I'm just like like that's part of it. Is just like this feeling of just fucking watching it. I keep sending that like Michael Jackson popcorn gif around, as it's just like, yeah, that's my role. But what a fucked up role that is. This feels weird.
I don't think, Biden, well, I don't know. I mean, maybe there'll be some relief checks that are significant. Maybe maybe the college loan thing will happen. I mean, I don't know. $10,000 seems to be the number now. And that is woefully inadequate, but
that's what you get for hitting $1 on the fucking wheel. The Price is Right.
I know, but look, I'm like, I sound like so beaten down. Like, oh, okay, yes, sir. Thank you for the scraps, Mr. Biden, sir.
Well, yeah, and there's a chapter in your book that caught my attention. It's actually the reason why I wanted to talk to you. But now there's so many other reasons, but like so many things you capture in this book. But healthcare in America is like the most like grim fucking thing in the world, and like the whole idea, like when you look at those like iPads. Like pick different like viral photos of like morgue, the morgue trailers outside of hospitals and all that shit. But it really just feels like a visual sort of representation of how ugly it is on the day to day for people. And the kind of big point of the starting point for your piece was sort of like this idea that they say like, oh, if you're feeling COVID symptoms, just talk to your doctor. Right. And it's sort of like, who the fuck can do that in America? Yeah. How did you find people for that piece? Because it seems like even with COVID, it's hard to like, you're sitting at home and you got to like email people, and it's that was the same job.
That's part of the thing of the book is trying to stay a reporter while not leaving your house that often makes it a lot harder.
Right.
But obviously you can use social media and I have a pretty big following on the newsletter, so sometimes I'll post a question like that and get, dozens of people chiming in with their own stories. But yeah, that was at the beginning. Like when COVID was first coming around, they were like, well, call your doctor to see if you can get tested or what your symptoms. And everyone was like, oh, what doctor? Like, who do I call? And then it's like the same thing. It's like another echo, like we were talking about. Like now it's like to get the vaccine, get in touch with your primary care to see when you might get it.
Jesus.
But like as that piece points out, so many people have no idea who, even people with insurance have no idea who their primary care doctor is, and even when you go to the doctor, like I go to the doctor a couple times a year now, and it's almost never my actual doctor. It's like some nurse practitioner or something, and I don't know, as you were like alluding to earlier, all of these problems existed before the pandemic, but the pandemic has really sort of served as an amplifier on all of these issues we already had,
And you put your head down and learn to accept like each step down the fucking ladder. Like that's what's rough. Like I was already I don't know, your previous book, your first Welcome to Hell World, like captured like how humiliating it is to like move through this society, right. and the like trying to get like something for your body to like survive and live, and having to go to like an office and fill out paperwork that's confusing and never know how much it's going to cost and where you're going next. And now like with the addition of like COVID, like to me, I'm like, I'm scared to go to the hospital for anything, right? Like it's not just COVID. Like I'm just like, if I fucking break my arm, I'm gonna fucking just splint it up at home. I'll get a YouTube video up. There's got to be one of how to do that because it's fucking crazy. Like, and that's the thing that like the GoFundMe thing that you've got in there too. Jesus.
Oh yeah, and I mean, and that's like. Well, there's another piece that I didn't end up putting in the book because it wasn't really specific to COVID about dental care too. And I had all these stories from people talking about how like they would watch. One person said they watched a YouTube video on how to like drain a tooth abscess or something.
God,
like, can you imagine that shit? And this is just like people because, they just, for lots of people, like, a $500 bill, $1,000 dental bill, whatever, that they just could not pay that. And this is millions of people. And like, I didn't go to the dentist for like a decade in my 20s probably. And that was a really bad decision. If anyone's in their 20s listening, go to the dentist, do whatever you can to actually take care of your teeth, because I ended up having to get like 2 different root canals. And those, I even went to like, the thing everyone says in Massachusetts, like, oh, there's all these dental teaching schools, so you go there and it's less expensive, and they were still like $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 to go to the dental school to get a root canal. Yeah. And
so you just don't do it.
So lots of people, like maybe I'm sure you were similar in your 20s, maybe. You just never go to the doctor. Like I didn't have insurance throughout my 20s at all. None. And I didn't either. I didn't get it until, thank you, Mitt Romney, for Romney Care. He got us made it so probably like 2007, whenever that was. So by that point I was, it's probably like 28 or something before I got health insurance,
Yeah, I was waiting tables for all that time, and you don't get that sort of shit. And like Obamacare didn't really solve that problem.
Like I'm 42 now, and I literally have never had a job with health insurance in my life, and I've never had a paid vacation in my life. And I mean, part of that is because I chose to be a freelancer and a waiter. Those were, the main jobs I've ever had, but still kind of wild to think about. Like I've never once had health insurance through a job. I mean, even though it's crazy to have health insurance through a job, the way that we do it like that is fucked up, but that happens to be the way that we do it. So
yeah, I mean, just the entire concept of health insurance itself is so fucking demonic. And yet you're like, everyone's striving to get health insurance. rather than health care. You know what I mean? Like there's just this idea that like actually getting taken care of by compassionate doctors that are gonna like take care of you in a way that's effective is just something that, and it's not going to cost anything. It's something that seems like an impossible dream in America. I have a friend, like the one close friend that actually got COVID. Speaking of the service industry, he's a waiter in New York City, and he got it pretty early on. And his experience was that he didn't have insurance at all. And it was in the height of the New York City bullshit. So it was like he didn't want to go to the hospital, and his wife was begging him to go to the hospital. He had 102 to 103 fever for 9 days in a row.
Shit.
Yeah, and on day 9, his wife finally begged him to do like a, I don't know, like FaceTime appointment with a doctor. And he did, and the doctor told him the most fucked up shit. The doctor told him, look, if it's day 9 and you've had over 102 fever for 9 days, that you're at like a point where it's either going to get better or it's going to get way worse, and that's that. And so you can like really monitor the next day where it goes. And so my friend said he went to bed that night like shaking, thinking that if I wake up and my fever's still bad, I'm dead. And he was getting used to the idea of dying. He woke up the next morning and it was 103. And he woke up the next morning and it was 103.
Jesus Christ.
And it ended up being 103 for 3 more days. And then on the 4th day, which would be day 14, he woke up and it was 98 degrees. And he said he's not a very sentimental guy, this guy, but he was like, he just broke down like sobbing.
Did it passed?
Yeah, over the 98 degrees temperature. And he got better. But it took him like 20 days. This guy is in his late 30s, dude. He works out all the time. He has he has no preconditions. That's another thing, is all the people like excusing the people that die. They're like, well, that they were old, or they were fat or something. It's just like, what kind of fucked up world are we in that says shit like that?
Right. As if people over 65 don't deserve to live. Like that, whenever you see one of these monsters talking about how it only kills people with this and that condition, it's like, yeah, being 65 isn't like a condition, man. It's like you're gonna be 65 before you know it. Like I think people that age deserve to live.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people over that age. My parents are in their 70s, and I mean, I see people on Facebook, like the sort of like anti-mask dudes and shit, and they're like, all these old people are gonna die anyway. What are we fucking? We can't ruin the world for these old people. And it's like, you're talking about my parents, dude. Like it would ruin. Like if my parents died from this, it would like ruin my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like
miserable.
It's so fucked up.
Yeah, I mean, I had a friend of mine's dad died from it, and he couldn't even go see him in the hospital. It's like, how fucking terrible is that? And that's again in part owed to our fucked up government, and in part because people won't stop going to parties.
Stop going to parties. Yeah, I mean, it's also people going to work too, dude. Like here in LA, I read these articles about like Costco and like fucking Costco. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and it's all, and like outbreaks at all the Costcos and workers there, and it's just like, there's that element of like, I think even Andrew Cuomo said the other day that like, we got to open up the economy, and there's this like weird fucking imperative. I think you said you had a great. You always have a great way of putting it. And maybe I'm paraphrasing, but he said something like, apparently, you can't get COVID if it's making money. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, if you're spending money, it doesn't. Yeah, like a lot of these mayors like in LA and Chicago and the governor here in Massachusetts, they all were. Like, I want to just reiterate that I'm not putting all the blame on people going to parties and stuff, and I'm certainly not blaming people who are forced to keep going to work. Especially the people who had no choice but to go to work. We should have paid everybody to stay home.
Yeah.
But it's one thing when it's me saying that, and it's a different thing when it's the actual people who could be making those decisions, our governors and mayors and everything, blaming it all on people getting together for parties. Like, no, dude, like you have bars and restaurants open right now, like, and they're just blaming people getting together at homes, like for private gatherings. Like if it's that bad, then shut down the fucking restaurants, pay suspend their rent, give them enough money to pay everybody's salary, and just let's take a month off. Like everybody take a month off. But we couldn't do that for some reason because of like freedom, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. At the same time, like it's weird because there is like kind of a holocaust of small businesses here in California. Like they're not making it.
Oh, that's fucked up too. Like the country we're going to come back out of this into is going to be, it's going to be like I read something about how like Wendy's and places like that are doing great.
Fuck.
But like
you live near a McDonald's now, right?
yeah, the McDonald's seems like it's got cars all the time. But meanwhile, like all of the places, like when my wife was trying to convince me to moving here wouldn't be so bad, there was like, 3 or 4 places, like, a couple, brewery type restaurant, whatever cool places you'd want to go to dinner. And they're all fucked. They're probably all going to be gone, when this is over. And, but there's going to be plenty of chain restaurants. So,
yeah, only the strong will survive, and the strong are the fucking giant corporations.
Well, that's how it should be, if you ask me. It's capitalism right there.
Dude, do you ever think that maybe you'll be able to write something like "Welcome to Heaven World"?
Probably not by the time. Probably not by the time I'm still alive, but I still have hope that someday,
Well, I mean, that's part of what I was wanting to ask you. I know it's like kind of a philosophical question because I was like at I was at fucking Sprouts yesterday, which I call the hillbilly Whole Foods in my neighborhood, because there's sort of like a trailer park near our Sprouts, and it's a very particular kind of culture in there. But either way, wearing the mask in the grocery store, marching out into Southern California sort of hazy heat. It's just sort of like overwhelming to like maintain your humanity in this sort of like in this sort of environment. And I like everything you write about in your book and your newsletters, like this sort of hell world idea is totally feels like authentic to the way I experience the world. And it feels like other people do too. But I guess I kind of asking like, how do you not become a like MAGA cunt, or how do you not become a fucking like really ugly nihilist through this? Because there is like your writing isn't a just like fuck everything sort of writing. I wouldn't find it appealing if it was. Instead, there's a sort of like, your horror is at the idea that there is a potential for a better world and for a better vision of how people can treat each other, etc. I mean, do you have any inkling of how you hold on to that part of it? Because I feel that too.
Yeah, no, I think, I mean, it wouldn't be worth living if you didn't have hope that things could get better, right? Or else you could just say fuck it and be like, all right, it's Mad Max and I'm like a bandit now, or I'm going to become like some kind of warlord of my little fiefdom. Like if you want to just go the opposite direction and become a complete selfish piece of shit, then I can understand the appeal of that.
Yeah.
But I still have hope. Like it's right there, like all this shit we're talking about in this discussion about healthcare, like the solution is right there. And we just have to, get a few more dominoes to fall over before we can improve that,
Mm-hmm.
And like it's within our reach. Like a lot of times it seems like it's not, when you see, not just Republicans, but like the shitty Democrats who don't think that, healthcare, like all these people, all year you saw like Joe Biden saying healthcare is a human right. And then like Ossoff or whatever was saying it's a human right, but they don't even actually believe that. They believe, it's a human right. Like human rights aren't things that you have to pay for. But I do think it's within reach that we can turn that shit around, like maybe that one particular aspect, and that right there would alleviate so much of the qualities that make this country seem like hell,
Yeah.
And policing, like this summer had me very optimistic. Like I didn't think things were going to, a switch was going to flip, but it was like, look at all these people coming together, like saying the way that we police and brutalize people is not right and we have to change it. And of course, there's going to be setbacks along the way, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I have to believe that things can be better, or else I'm just gonna go drink myself into a coma. And
Well, I think that's what a lot of people are already doing, dude. Like a lot of people aren't this thoughtful about it, right? They're just like, well, they're at the fuck it moment already. That's what's scary. That's what's scary too. I think is sort of like being quote unquote. I think you use the tongue in cheek phrase like quote unquote one of the good ones. Like maybe in the Cormac McCarthy sense, the ones who carry the fire. Right, recognizing how like low the society is going, and recognizing that like fuck, if I didn't have whatever the fire is inside of me, and it wasn't installed by church or anything like that for me, at least. I don't know where it comes from. If I didn't have that, then it might be very easy for me to fall into that Mad Max shit. And that's what's scary, is recognizing that a lot of people are already there. Yeah. And like more and more, like I think that was part of what was shocking for people about the Capitol thing. Is like, God, look how fucking desperate these people are to fuck up their lives and go to prison. And that's what's gonna happen to a lot of them, dude. Right. Fucking morons that like, that embrace the fucking horrific vision of whatever the fuck they think the world is.
For sure.
Well, shit, Luke. Thanks so much for talking with me. Your new book is called Lockdown in Hell World. I thoroughly recommend it. And like I said, I recommend it not only as a great catalog of like what's happened to us this year, in terms of the history, but also as sort of like there's a real beating pulse. Not to put you on the spot, but there's a real beating heart on those pages. So thanks for writing it, and thanks for sharing your
thank you so much for your interest and for reading it, and I really appreciate it. And maybe looks like we're gonna talk once a year now, so maybe next year by the time we talk, things will be a little bit better.
Let's hope. All right, man. Take care.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.
All right, I want to thank my guest, Luke ONeil. Go subscribe to his newsletter. Go get his books, Welcome to Hell World, and the newest one, Lockdown in Hell World. They're both just absolutely shattering documents of our time, and so much deeper and richer than so much of the other stuff that I've seen out there, these fucking lame COVID journals, how I learned to craft and shit like that. This gets to really some of the more, the sort of more bodily, visceral, ugly feelings that all of us are trying to navigate right now. And I know it's dark stuff, but I don't feel dark when I read Luke's stuff. I always feel, like I said, in this conversation many times, I feel connected to something human. So thanks, Luke. We'll talk to you again very soon. And if you want to go check out our stuff, it's at patreon.com/nostalgiatrap. We're always needing new subscribers to keep the project going, and we appreciate everyone who's doing that. We will talk to you very soon. All right, take care. See ya.